The sleek glass doors of Harlow Sustainable Innovations parted silently as Derek Mason strode through the lobby, adjusting his custom-tailored navy suit. His polished leather shoes clicked confidently across the marble floor as he headed for the executive elevator. This interview for Director of Corporate Communications was his ticket to everything he'd been working toward: prestige, connections, a salary that would finally match his ambitions. The receptionist directed him to the 52nd floor with a professional smile. "Ms. Harlow will see you personally." Derek's practiced smile widened. The CEO herself. Perfect. When the elevator doors opened to the executive suite, he straightened his Italian silk tie, mentally rehearsing his opening lines. The assistant led him to a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. At the head of the long walnut table sat a woman with silver-streaked dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, studying a document with quiet intensity. "Ms. Harlow," Derek said, extending his hand with practiced charm. "It's a pleasure." Derek Mason. The woman looked up, and the world seemed to stop spinning. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Victoria Harlow, not the mid-level consultant he'd dismissed at holiday dinners, but the billionaire CEO of a $14 billion empire, was his soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. His hand froze mid-air. The blood drained from his face. "Victoria?" he whispered, his voice cracking. She didn't stand. She simply leaned back slightly in her chair and said, in a calm, measured voice, "Yes, Derek, it's me. Sit down." Have you ever had that moment when someone who thought you were worthless suddenly realizes exactly who you are? That perfect, crystallizing instant when their entire world shifts. My husband of 7 years had just called me a nobody and walked out on our marriage. Now he was sitting across from my billionaire mother in the most important job interview of his career. How did we get here? And what happens when a man who values only status and connections discovers he's thrown away the most valuable connection he could have ever had? Hey, my queens, gather close. Today's story is for every woman who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel small by someone who couldn't see her true value. We've all been there, having our worth measured by the wrong yardstick, by people too shallow to understand that real power often moves quietly through the world. But here's the truth. You are never defined by someone else's limited vision of you. The woman who stands in her own truth, who knows her own worth, she's unstoppable. And sometimes, life has a beautiful way of revealing exactly who you are to those who failed to see you. Today's story is about the sweet justice that comes when a man who measures worth by bank accounts and business cards discovers too late what he's thrown away. It's about mothers and daughters, about the strength that runs through generations of women, and about finding the love that truly sees you. So settle in, my sisters, as we witness what happens when the nobody turns out to be the most powerful somebody of all. Derek sank into the chair across from Victoria, visibly shaken, his usual polish gone. The confident smile that had charmed clients and colleagues for years had vanished in an instant. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the polished table. Victoria opened a leather portfolio with deliberate calm. "Your resume is impressive, Derek. 7 years at Meridian Marketing, consistent advancement, strong client testimonials." "Thank you," he managed, his voice strained. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route. "Let's start with your approach to crisis management," Victoria continued, as if this were any normal interview. "How would you handle a situation where public perception suddenly shifts against the company?" Derek swallowed hard, struggling to collect himself. I believe in transparency and proactive communication. Getting ahead of the narrative." "Interesting." Victoria made a note. "And what about internal communications during times of transition? How do you ensure all stakeholders feel valued and informed?" For 20 excruciating minutes, Victoria conducted the interview with professional detachment, asking standard questions about brand strategy and media relations. Derek answered mechanically, his responses growing more coherent as he grasped at the thin hope that perhaps, impossibly, this was just business, that the personal connection between them wouldn't factor into her decision. Then Victoria set down her pen and leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. "Tell me, Derek, How do you treat the people who love you quietly? The ones who support you through ordinary days without asking for anything flashy in return. The question hung in the air between them. Derek's face paled again. I value loyalty, of course, he stammered. Victoria's eyes never left his. 7 years ago, you married my daughter Olivia. You promised to love and cherish her. 3 weeks ago, you told her she was a nobody. You said she had no connections, no status, and that you couldn't build your empire with someone so ordinary. You walked out on her while she was still wearing her wedding ring. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Victoria, Ms. Harlow. That was said in the heat of the moment. I was under pressure. I never meant. You meant every word. Victoria cut in, her voice steel wrapped in silk. You measured my daughter's worth by her bank account and the names in her Rolodex. You never understood that Olivia chose to live modestly because she wanted a real marriage, one built on love, not on what I could provide. She is kind, strong, and grounded in ways you'll never be, and she is my only child. The future of this company rests with her if she ever wants it. Derek tried desperately to salvage the moment, stammering apologies and explanations about personal growth and misspoken words. Victoria listened for exactly 30 seconds, then stood up gracefully. The position is no longer available to you, Derek. In fact, I'll be making a few calls this afternoon. In Chicago's business circles, character still matters. And yours has been weighed and found wanting. She pressed a small button on the table. The door opened immediately, revealing 2 security officers in dark suits. Please escort Mr. Mason out of the building, Victoria said calmly. As Derek was led away, his face ashen with humiliation, Victoria remained standing, watching him go with the quiet dignity that had built her empire. Sisters, have you ever witnessed someone's mask slip in an instant? Share your story in the comments. But to understand how we got here, how Derek Mason went from beloved husband to stunned interviewee being escorted from the building, we need to go back. Back to where it all began, and to the choices that led us to that conference room. I was 35 when I first noticed the disappointment in Derek's eyes. We were at the Johnson's Charity Gala, one of Chicago's premier social events, and I had come straight from work, still wearing a simple cotton sundress with my hair pulled back in a messy bun after a long day counseling teenagers about their futures. You could have at least changed, Olivia, Derek whispered, his smile never faltering as he greeted another executive from his firm. Everyone here is in designer labels. I smoothed my dress self-consciously. I had back-to-back appointments with seniors applying for scholarships. Marissa was having a breakdown about her essay. I couldn't just leave. Derek's jaw tightened slightly. These people fund those scholarships. Appearances matter. That night, I watched him work the room with practiced charm, his hand occasionally returning to the small of my back. A gesture that once felt protective but now seemed possessive, as if he were presenting me like an accessory that didn't quite match his carefully curated image. I was a dedicated high school guidance counselor who had built my career helping kids find their path. I drove a sensible Honda Civic, volunteered at the women's shelter downtown, and lived simply in our cozy brick bungalow in Lincoln Park. I loved our Sunday morning pancake tradition, quiet evenings on the porch swing, and the life we'd built over 7 years of marriage. Derek Mason was 40, impeccably dressed, and relentlessly ambitious. He had risen through the ranks at Meridian Marketing, one of Chicago's most prestigious firms, through a combination of genuine talent and calculated networking. When we met at a mutual friend's wedding, he had been charmed by my directness, my passion for education, my lack of pretense. You're like a breath of fresh air, he'd said on our third date, reaching across the table to take my hand. Everyone else is playing games, but you're just real. I remember the warmth that spread through me at those words. After years of dating men who seemed intimidated by my independence or who pushed to meet my mother once they caught wind of her success, Derek's appreciation for my simple authenticity felt like coming home. What Derek didn't know, what I deliberately kept from him, was that I could have worn designer labels to that charity gala. I could have driven a luxury car and lived in a Gold Coast penthouse. I could have opened doors to the highest echelons of Chicago society with a single phone call. Because my mother was Victoria Harlow, founder and CEO of Harlow Sustainable Innovations, a $14 billion clean energy empire she had built from the ground up. My mother, with her silver-streaked chignon and quiet, unshakable confidence, was one of the most powerful women in American business. And I was her only daughter. I had intentionally kept my life separate from her wealth and influence. I used my father's last name professionally. I lived on my counselor's salary. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the empire behind me. Derek thought he had married an ordinary middle-class woman. He had no idea that the modest woman he occasionally met for holiday dinners, who he dismissed as your mother the consultant, controlled half the energy contracts in the Midwest. My mother had known Derek for years. She had observed him quietly at family gatherings, noted the way his eyes constantly scanned rooms for more important people to talk to, and never quite trusted what she called the hungry look in his eyes. "He loves you," she had said cautiously when I announced our engagement, her fingers lightly touching the pearls at her throat, a gesture I knew meant she was choosing her words carefully. "But I'm not sure he knows who you really are." I had laughed it off, twisting my modest engagement ring. "That's the point, Mom. He loves me for me, not for your money or connections." She had smiled then, but her eyes remained concerned. "Just remember, sweetheart, a man who loves you for who you are will love all of you. Your background, your choices, your values. Not just the parts that fit his narrative." 7 years later, on a quiet Tuesday evening in October, Derek would prove her right in the most painful way possible. I had made his favorite dinner, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. The table was set with the simple stoneware we'd received as wedding gifts, candles lit against the early autumn darkness. Derek was late, which wasn't unusual. His texts had been increasingly brief lately, his kisses distracted, his questions about my day perfunctory at best. When he finally arrived, his expression was oddly resolved. He hung his coat carefully, poured himself a scotch, and sat across from me at our kitchen table. "This looks nice," he said, but he didn't touch his food. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to read the unfamiliar distance in his eyes. "We need to talk, Olivia." He took a deliberate sip of his scotch. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our future." My heart quickened. For months, we'd been discussing starting a family. 35, I felt ready. Maybe this was about setting a timeline, making concrete plans. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, impossible and yet somehow not entirely surprising. Some part of me had felt him pulling away for months. "Why?" I managed, my voice steadier than I expected. Derek set his glass down carefully. "You're a wonderful woman, Liv. You're kind and caring, and any man would be lucky to have you. But I need more." He looked directly at me now. "I'm up for the executive VP position. If I get it, I'll be moving in circles where connections matter, where the right partner opens doors." I stared at him, not quite comprehending. "And I don't open doors? Let's be honest. You're a high school counselor. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. Your idea of networking is chatting with parents at school functions." His voice wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact. "You're content being ordinary, Liv. And that's fine, it's who you are. But I need someone who matches my ambition, who brings something to the table besides this." He gestured vaguely at our modest home. "This?" I repeated slowly. "You mean our life together, our marriage. I mean a partnership that elevates both people." Derek's expression softened slightly. "You're a nobody in the circles I need to move in, Olivia. No real money, no influential network, no ambition beyond your little office at Westridge High. I need someone who can help me build an empire. A nobody." The words sliced through me, sharp and clean. 7 years of marriage reduced to a brutal assessment of my perceived value. The irony might have made me laugh if it weren't so painful. Derek dismissing me for lacking the very things I had intentionally kept hidden from him. "I see," I said quietly. "I've already found an apartment. My lawyer will be in touch about the division of assets." He stood, straightening his tie. "I'm sorry, Liv. You deserve someone who wants the life you want." And then he was gone, grabbing his coat and walking out, leaving me sitting there in the silence of our home, still wearing my wedding ring, the candles flickering over a dinner that had gone cold. I sat motionless for what felt like hours, his words echoing in my mind. You're a nobody, the casual cruelty of it, the absolute certainty that I had nothing of value to offer. When I finally moved, it was to reach for my phone. I called the one person who had always seen my true worth. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice finally breaking. "Derek's leaving me." Victoria Harlow's penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan was a study in understated elegance. Clean lines, warm woods, and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the city's glittering skyline. I sat curled in the corner of her cream-colored sofa, wrapped in the cashmere throw she kept for chilly evenings, a mug of tea cooling between my hands. He said I was a nobody. I told her, the words still raw in my throat, that I couldn't help him build his empire. My mother's face remained composed, but I recognized the dangerous stillness that came over her when she was truly angry. At 63, Victoria Harlow commanded rooms without raising her voice. Her silver-streaked dark hair was swept into its usual elegant chignon. Her only jewelry a pair of simple pearl earrings and her wedding band, though my father had been gone for 15 years. "Did you tell him?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. What would be the point now? To prove him wrong? To make him regret leaving me because of who you are, not because he actually loves me? My mother nodded, understanding perfectly. She had raised me to value authenticity above all else. After my father died when I was 20, she had become my closest confidant, respecting my choice to build a life independent of her wealth and influence. "What do you need, sweetheart?" she asked, reaching over to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture from my childhood. "Just time," I said, "and maybe a good lawyer." She smiled then, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "I can certainly help with the latter." What I didn't know then was that my mother had already set something in motion, something that would give Derek Mason a lesson in exactly who he had walked away from. "My queens, tag a woman who's been your rock during hard times. Let's celebrate the women who lift us up." 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and quiet grief. Derek moved out efficiently, taking only his personal belongings and leaving me the house, since you're so attached to it. His lawyer, a sleek, aggressive type from a prestigious firm, sent over divorce papers with terms that were neither generous nor particularly fair. I hired my own attorney, a calm, steely woman recommended by my mother, and tried to focus on my students as the painful machinery of dissolving a marriage ground forward. The holidays loomed, and with them, college application deadlines that kept my office busy from morning until night. I was staying late one evening, helping a brilliant but anxious senior finalize her personal essay, when my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Are you free for dinner tonight? I have something to share." We met at Marisol, a quiet restaurant tucked inside the Museum of Contemporary Art, where the staff knew my mother well enough to give us a private corner table. She was already there when I arrived, looking particularly satisfied about something. "You look better," she observed as I sat down. "Still not sleeping enough, but better." I managed a small smile. "The students keep me going. Focusing on their futures helps me not think about mine." "About that," my mother said, reaching for her water glass, "I had an interesting day at the office." Something in her tone made me pause. "What happened?" "We've been interviewing for the Director of Corporate Communications position. The final candidates came in today." She took a deliberate sip of water. Imagine my surprise when Derek Mason walked into my conference room. The world seemed to stop for a moment. "Derek interviewed with you? At Harlow?" My mother nodded, a glint of something fierce in her eyes. "Apparently, he's been quite eager to join our executive team. The position offers a substantial salary increase over his current role, not to mention the prestige of working for one of the largest privately held companies in the Midwest." "He had no idea," I whispered, the full impact hitting me. "He applied to work for you without knowing who you really are." "Indeed." My mother's smile was calm but held no warmth. "He walked into that conference room with all his practiced confidence, extended his hand, and then saw exactly who was sitting at the head of the table. I could picture it perfectly, Derek in his sharpest navy suit, the one he saved for important meetings, striding into the sleek conference room on the 52nd floor of the Harlow building. The shock that must have registered on his face when he recognized the woman he had dismissed as your mother, the consultant, sitting there as the CEO of a $14 billion empire. What did he do? I asked, torn between horror and a strange, vindicating thrill. Turned absolutely white, my mother said with quiet satisfaction. I've never seen a man's confidence evaporate so completely in an instant. His hand froze mid-air. He couldn't even speak my name properly. And you? What did you do? I conducted the interview, she said simply. Asked all the standard questions about crisis management strategies and brand positioning. He tried to answer professionally, but he was visibly shaken. His hands trembled on the table. I could only imagine Derek's internal panic, realizing too late that the woman whose daughter he had just callously discarded as a nobody controlled the very opportunity he had been pursuing to advance his career. Then, my mother continued, I asked him a different kind of question. I asked how he treats the people who love him quietly, the ones who support him through ordinary days without asking for anything flashy in return. My throat tightened. Mom! He needed to hear it, Olivia. He needed to understand exactly what he walked away from. Her eyes, so like my own, held mine steadily. I told him that you chose to live modestly because you wanted a real marriage, one built on love, not on what I could provide. That you are kind, strong, and grounded in ways he will never be. And that you are my only child, the future of my company if you ever want it. Tears pricked at my eyes, not for Derek, but for this fierce, protective love that had always been my foundation. What did he say? He tried to backpedal. Said things were said in the heat of the moment, that he was under pressure. My mother's expression hardened slightly. I let him speak for exactly 30 seconds before I stood up and informed him that the position was no longer available to him. Then security escorted him out. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Derek finally knew the truth, sadness for the years wasted on someone who had valued me so little, and a strange sense of closure. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. Yes, I did. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. No one breaks my daughter's heart and then expects to walk into my company like nothing happened. Besides, she added with a small smile, he would have been a terrible fit for the position. His portfolio was mediocre at best. That made me laugh. A real laugh, the first in weeks. My mother had always had an unerring eye for talent. If she said Derek's work was mediocre, then it absolutely was. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, squeezing my hand. You remember who you are. Not Derek Mason's wife. Not Victoria Harlow's daughter. Just Olivia Bennett. A woman of substance and compassion who has always known that true worth isn't measured by bank accounts or business connections. As we ordered dinner and the conversation shifted to other topics, I felt something inside me begin to heal. Not completely, that would take time, but enough to glimpse a future beyond the pain of Derek's betrayal. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and walked away with a settlement that was far more equitable than Derek's initial offer. Whether that was due to my lawyer's skill or Derek's newfound awareness of who he was really dealing with, I never asked. Derek disappeared from Chicago's glittering corporate scene. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard he had taken a position with a smaller firm in Milwaukee, a lateral move at best. No corner office, no executive title, just quiet regret and a reputation subtly tarnished by whispers in the right circles. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall. The woman who had loved him for 7 years couldn't celebrate his humiliation, even if he had deserved it. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life brick by brick, finding strength in the work that had always given me purpose. I poured my energy into my students and expanded the scholarship program I ran for kids from single-parent homes. With my mother's blessing, I established the Bennett Foundation, using my father's name, to provide mentoring and college preparation for first-generation students. I kept my modest lifestyle but allowed myself one indulgence: converting the home office Derek had used into a sunlit art studio where I returned to the painting I had abandoned years ago. "You used to love this?" my mother said when she visited and saw the canvases taking shape. Abstract landscapes in rich blues and greens. "I remember when your bedroom walls were covered with your work." Derek thought it was impractical, I admitted. A hobby that took up too much space. My mother studied a half-finished canvas, her head tilted slightly. "He never did understand what makes a life rich, did he?" She was right. Derek had always measured success in acquisitions, the right address, the right car, the right connections. He had never understood that true wealth lay in the freedom to pursue your passions, to help others find theirs, to build a life aligned with your values rather than someone else's expectations. As winter melted into spring, I found myself smiling more, laughing with my students, rediscovering the woman I had been before I started shrinking myself to fit into Derek's vision of an appropriate wife. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was healing, and that was enough for now. 6 months after the divorce, at a fundraiser for the foundation, I met James Whitaker, a divorced architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that required no external validation. He was there because he had designed a community center in one of Chicago's underserved neighborhoods, a project that had won awards for its innovative approach to creating spaces for youth education. "Your scholarship program sounds incredible," he said when we were introduced, his interest genuine rather than polite. "How many students have you been able to help?" 27 so far, I told him. "But we're expanding this year. The goal is 50. "What made you focus on first-generation college students specifically?" It wasn't small talk. He was actually listening, his eyes never scanning the room for more important people to talk to, his attention fully present in our conversation. "I see so many brilliant kids who don't apply to college simply because no one in their family has navigated that path before," I explained. "They don't know how to decode the system, financial aid forms, application essays, campus visits. Things that seem straightforward if you grew up with college-educated parents become overwhelming barriers." James nodded. "That's exactly what we tried to address with the community center design. Creating spaces where kids could access resources they might not have at home, quiet study areas, computer labs, mentoring rooms. We talked for nearly an hour, oblivious to the gala happening around us. He asked thoughtful questions about my work with students and listened to the answers with genuine interest. When the event ended, he asked if he could call me sometime. "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. On our first date, we went to a small art gallery in Pilsen featuring local artists. On our second, we walked along the lakefront with coffee, talking about everything from architecture to favorite childhood books. On our third date, he brought me coffee just the way I liked it and admitted he had called the foundation office to ask my assistant how I took it. "That's either very sweet or slightly stalkerish," I teased. "I was aiming for thoughtful," he said with a self-deprecating smile. I wanted to get it right. There was something refreshing about James's straightforward approach to dating. No games, no posturing, no carefully calculated moves to impress. Just a genuine desire to know me and to be known in return. James knew from the beginning about my mother. I told him on our fourth date, sitting in his modest backyard under string lights as he grilled vegetables for dinner. "My mother is Victoria Harlow," I said simply, "of Harlow Sustainable Innovations." He paused, spatula in hand. "The Victoria Harlow? The billionaire clean energy pioneer." I nodded, watching his face carefully for the shift I'd seen in so many others. The sudden calculation, the mental recalibration of who I was in relation to my mother's wealth and influence. "That's unexpected," he said after a moment of surprise. "But it explains a lot about you." "What do you mean?" "You have this quiet certainty about who you are," he explained, turning back to the grill. "Like you have nothing to prove to anyone. It's compelling. No calculation. No sudden shift in how he treated me. Just an observation about my character that showed he had been paying attention all along." "My ex-husband didn't know," I admitted. "I never told him." James looked up, his expression thoughtful. That must have been a difficult secret to keep. It wasn't a secret exactly. More a choice to live on my own terms, to be loved for who I am rather than what my mother built. And when he found out, in the most humiliating way possible, I said with a rueful smile. He applied for a job at her company without realizing who she was. Walked into the interview and found himself face to face with his soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. James winced. Ouch. Yeah, not my finest moment of maturity, letting that happen without warning him. I don't know, James said, sliding the grilled vegetables onto a platter. Sounds like poetic justice to me. We ate dinner under the stars, talking about our pasts without bitterness. His amicable divorce after growing apart from his college sweetheart, my complicated journey with Derek. It felt like laying foundations for something honest, something built on mutual respect rather than projection or performance. Sisters, what's one green flag you now look for in relationships? Share your wisdom below. As summer turned to fall, James and I settled into a relationship that felt both exciting and comfortable. He had a 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, from his previous marriage, a thoughtful, artistic girl who spent weekends with him and who, to my surprise, seemed to genuinely like me. Dad says you help kids go to college, she said the first time we met, over pizza at James's kitchen table. That's part of what I do, I confirmed. I'm a high school guidance counselor. Cool. I want to go to RISD someday. For illustration. Rhode Island School of Design? That's ambitious. Sophie shrugged. Dad says if you're going to dream, dream big. I glanced at James, who was watching our interaction with quiet pleasure. Your dad is a wise man. He also said you're the smartest person he's ever dated, Sophie added matter-of-factly. And the prettiest. Sophie, James groaned, his cheeks flushing. What? You did say that. I heard you telling Uncle Mike on the phone. I laughed, charmed by her directness and by James's embarrassment. Well, I think your dad is pretty great too. It was refreshing, this blended life we were creating. Sunday brunches with Sophie, quiet evenings alone when she was with her mother, occasional dinners with my mother who, true to form, had assessed James with her keen business eye and declared him a man who understands value beyond the balance sheet. 9 months after we started dating, on a crisp October evening exactly 1 year after Derek had walked out, James and I sat on the porch swing of my little brick bungalow, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. We had spent the day helping Sophie with a science project, then made dinner together in my kitchen, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of people who fit naturally into each other's spaces. I've been thinking, James said, his arm warm around my shoulders. Dangerous, I teased. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. This past year with you has been the happiest of my life. You and Sophie together. Watching you help her with her art. Seeing how you listen to her. Really listen. It's everything I could have hoped for. My heart quickened. James. He shifted slightly, reaching into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. No grand gesture, no elaborate setup. Just a simple question asked with absolute certainty. Olivia Bennett, will you marry me? Will you build a life with Sophie and me? A real partnership based on who we are together, not what we have or what we do. I looked at this man who had never once made me feel small, who saw my worth not in my connections or my background but in my character, my passions, my heart. The answer was as clear as the stars emerging above us. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes, I will. The ring was perfect, not flashy or ostentatious, but a vintage emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, unique and thoughtful like the man who had chosen it. It reminded me of your eyes, James said as he slipped it onto my finger. An emerald symbolized truth and love. Seemed fitting. I kissed him then. This man who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in carats or status symbols, but in moments of genuine connection. I love you, I whispered against his lips. All of you. And I love all of you, he answered. The counselor, the artist, the foundation director, the daughter of Victoria Harlow, and most of all, the woman who knows exactly who she is. My mother adored James from their first meeting. He sees you, she said simply after dinner at her penthouse. All of you. When we told her about our engagement, her eyes filled with rare tears. Your father would have loved him, she said, touching the wedding band she still wore. He valued the same things in people: integrity, kindness, the courage to live authentically. We married in the garden behind my childhood home, a historic Evanston property my mother had maintained after my father died. It was a small ceremony, just 50 guests, mostly family and close friends. Sophie, now 13, was my maid of honor, wearing a dress she had helped design, her face solemn with the responsibility. My mother walked me down the aisle, elegant in a silver blue suit that matched her eyes. As she placed my hand in James's, she leaned in and whispered something that made him smile and nod with solemn promise. Later, I asked what she had said. I told him he was getting the most precious thing in my world, James admitted. And that true wealth isn't what's in your bank account, but who waits for you to come home. We wrote our own vows, simple promises to support each other's dreams, to build a home filled with creativity and compassion, to face life's challenges together rather than alone. As we exchanged rings under an arbor draped with autumn flowers, I felt a sense of rightness, of coming full circle. This was what I had always wanted, not a marriage based on appearances or advantages, but a true partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love. A relationship where both people could be fully themselves, without pretense or performance. As James kissed me, sealing our vows, I caught sight of my mother in the front row, her expression one of fierce pride and tender joy. She had always seen my worth, had taught me to value substance over status, authenticity over advantage. And now, in James, I had found someone who saw me with that same clear-eyed love. The reception was held on the lawn, with string lights twinkling in the trees and tables set with wildflowers in simple glass vases. No elaborate floral arrangements, no champagne fountains, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Just good food, warm conversation, and genuine celebration. As James and I moved among our guests, hand in hand, I caught glimpses of the life we were building. Sophie showing my mother her sketchbook, James's parents chatting easily with my colleagues from Westridge High, friends from different chapters of our lives finding common ground in their affection for us. This was wealth that Derek could never have understood. The richness of authentic connections, the luxury of being truly known and loved, the abundance that comes from aligning your outer life with your inner values. I didn't think of Derek often anymore. The pain of his betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons it had taught me and the path it had ultimately led me toward. But that evening, as James and I shared our first dance under the stars, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. "Penny for your thoughts," James murmured, his hand warm against the small of my back. "I was just thinking about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best," I said. "If Derek hadn't left, calling me a nobody, then I might never have had the chance to show you that you're everything," James finished, pulling me closer. I rested my head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him. Cedar and clean cotton and home. Exactly. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, my mother found me sitting alone for a moment, watching James twirl Sophie around the dance floor, both of them laughing. "Happy?" she asked, settling beside me. "Completely," I said, and meant it. She took my hand, her fingers cool and strong. "You know, when your father and I were building the company, we had nothing. A tiny apartment, second-hand furniture, more dreams than dollars. But we were rich in all the ways that mattered." I nodded, understanding perfectly. My parents' love story was legendary. The brilliant engineer and the visionary businesswoman who had started Harlow Sustainable Innovations in their garage, working 18-hour days to develop more efficient solar technology when most of the industry still dismissed renewable energy as impractical. "He never cared about the money," my mother continued, her eyes on some distant memory. "Even when we made our first million, then our first 10 million, he still drove that beat-up Volvo and wore sweaters with patches on the elbows. What mattered to him was creating something meaningful, something that would make the world better for you." "I wish he could be here," I said softly. "Oh, he is." My mother smiled, the same smile I saw in photographs of her as a young woman, before success and loss had tempered her joy with wisdom. He's in the way you value substance over show, in your commitment to helping those students, in your courage to live authentically even when it would have been easier to use our name and connections. She glanced toward James, who was now chatting with my oldest friend from college, his expression animated as he described some architectural concept with his hands. And he would have adored James, a man who builds things meant to last, both structures and relationships. "Thank you," I said, squeezing her hand, "not just for today, but for everything, for showing me what real strength looks like, for respecting my choices even when they weren't the ones you would have made. That's what love is, sweetheart. Seeing someone clearly and cherishing who they truly are, not who you wish they would be." She kissed my cheek and stood. "Now go dance with your husband. This old woman needs her beauty sleep." "You're not old," I protested automatically. She laughed. "I'm 64 with a multi-billion-dollar company and a newly married daughter. I've earned every one of these silver hairs." As she moved away to say her goodbyes, I watched her. This extraordinary woman who had shaped not just my life but an entire industry, who had faced down boardrooms full of skeptical men and transformed America's energy landscape through sheer brilliance and determination. Yet for all her public power, it was her private strength that had influenced me most. Her integrity, her compassion, her unwavering belief in living according to your values rather than others' expectations. I rejoined James, sliding my arm around his waist as he talked with the last remaining guests. He automatically adjusted to include me in the conversation, his hand finding mine with the easy intimacy of two people who fit together naturally. This was what Derek had thrown away, not the connections or wealth he had never known about, but the chance to build a life with someone who would have supported his dreams while staying true to her own. Someone who understood that real success isn't measured in status symbols or social climbing but in the integrity with which you live each day. His loss, James's gain, and ultimately mine as well. I'm 38 now, and I've never felt more at peace. James and I split our time between his modernist lake house in Michigan and my cozy bungalow in the city. Sophie, now 14, has her own room in both homes, decorated with her increasingly impressive artwork and filled with books about famous illustrators and graphic novelists. The Bennett Foundation has expanded beyond our initial goals, now supporting over 100 students each year with scholarships, mentoring, and college preparation. I still work as a guidance counselor at Westridge High, still drive a sensible car, though I upgraded to a newer hybrid model, and still volunteer at the women's shelter downtown. The difference is that now I do these things not as a rejection of my mother's world, but as an authentic expression of who I am, a woman shaped by both her father's idealism and her mother's pragmatic strength, someone who values substance over status and connection over competition. James understands this completely. His architectural practice focuses on sustainable community spaces, libraries, schools, affordable housing designed with both beauty and practicality in mind. He measures success not by the size of his commissions but by the impact of his work on the people who inhabit the spaces he creates. Together, we're building a life rich in meaning if not extravagant in trappings. We host Sunday dinners for friends and family, take Sophie to art museums and architectural landmarks, spend quiet evenings on the porch swing talking about our days, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. My mother remains a force of nature in the business world, though she's begun the process of stepping back, grooming her brilliant COO to eventually take the reins of Harlow Sustainable Innovations. She still doesn't understand why I have no interest in joining the company, but she respects my choice to build my own legacy in education rather than energy. Different paths, same values, she says with characteristic precision. As for Derek, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he eventually left Milwaukee for a position in Minneapolis. Another lateral move, another fresh start. I wish him well, genuinely. I hope he finds what he's looking for, though I suspect he's still chasing external markers of success rather than the deeper satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your true self. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about that moment in my mother's conference room, when the woman he had dismissed as ordinary was revealed to be connected to extraordinary power and influence. Does he regret walking away from our marriage? Does he understand yet that the nobody he left behind had always been somebody of immense worth, regardless of her mother's wealth or status? I'll never know. And truthfully, it no longer matters. What matters is the life I've built from the ashes of his rejection. A life more authentic, more aligned with my values, more deeply satisfying than the one we shared. What matters is the man who sits beside me on the porch swing each evening, who sees my worth not in my connections or background but in my character and heart. What matters is the stepdaughter who brings me her college application essays to review, who trusts me to guide her toward her dreams without imposing my own. Last month, at a charity gala much like the one where Derek had once been embarrassed by my simple sundress, I wore a modest but elegant black dress that James had said brought out the green in my eyes. My mother was being honored for her contributions to clean energy innovation, and James and I were there to support her. As we moved through the crowd of Chicago's elite, business leaders, philanthropists, old money and new, I felt none of the self-consciousness that had plagued me during similar events with Derek. No one there knew I was Victoria Harlow's daughter unless they had done their research. I still used my father's name professionally, still lived my life on my own terms. "Mrs. Whitaker," a familiar voice said behind me. What a surprise. I turned to find myself face to face with Derek Mason for the first time since our divorce was finalized 2 years earlier. He looked older, more strained around the eyes, though his suit was as impeccable as ever. "Derek," I said calmly, "it's good to see you." James appeared at my side, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. Not possessively, as Derek's once had, but supportively. "Everything okay, love?" "Yes," I said, smiling up at him. "James, this is Derek Mason, an old friend. Derek, my husband, James Whitaker." The men shook hands, sizing each other up with the instinctive wariness of alpha wolves from different packs. "Whitaker," Derek said, recognition dawning. "The architect. I read about your community center project in Architectural Digest." "That's right," James said easily, "though I'm more proud of the kids who use it than the magazine spread." Derek nodded, his eyes moving between us. "And you're here for?" "My mother is receiving an award tonight," I said simply. Understanding flickered across his face. He knew exactly who my mother was now, knew what he had walked away from without ever truly seeing. "Congratulations to her," he said stiffly. "Please extend my regards." "I will," I promised. "And how are you, Derek? I heard you moved to Minneapolis." "Yes, a good opportunity came up." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Still climbing the ladder, you know how it is." But I didn't know, not anymore. I had stopped measuring success by promotions and status symbols, had found a different kind of fulfillment in building a life of meaning and authenticity. "Well, it was nice seeing you," I said, genuinely meaning it. "I wish you all the best." As James and I moved away, I felt Derek's eyes following us. Watching this woman he had once called a nobody move confidently through a world he had spent his life trying to conquer. "You okay?" James asked quietly. I squeezed his hand. Never better. And it was true. In losing Derek, I had found myself. In being called a nobody, I had discovered who I truly was. In having my worth questioned, I had learned to value it more deeply than ever before. That night, as James and I returned home to our brick bungalow with its porch swing and art studio, as we kicked off our formal shoes and changed into comfortable clothes, as we sat in the kitchen with late-night tea and talked about the evening, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. "You were amazing tonight," James said, reaching across the table to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Seeing you with Derek. You were so gracious, so completely yourself. I've made peace with that chapter of my life," I told him. "It led me to you after all." He smiled, the smile that still made my heart skip after 2 years of marriage. "His loss my gain. And mine," I added softly. "Definitely mine." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more timeless love tales with Mr. Harrison. Remember, my queens, your worth is never determined by someone else's limited vision of you. It's measured by the courage with which you live your truth, the compassion you show others, and the integrity that guides your choices. Sometimes the greatest gift is when someone who doesn't see your value walks away, making room for those who will treasure all that you are. The greatest revenge isn't showing someone what they missed. It's living so fully and authentically that their opinion no longer matters. And the most powerful legacy isn't built on wealth or status, but on the lives you touch, the hearts you heal, and the love you share freely with those who truly see you. You are never a nobody. You are a woman of substance, of strength, of immeasurable worth. And the right people will always recognize that, even when, especially when, you're not trying to prove it.